to Discipleship Debrief for today. We've taken a little bit of a break for the holidays. Glad to be back. And we have been talking about taking on the yoke of Jesus, taking on what he believed and what following him really means. Uh, in their time, we talked about last time that two rabbinical schools that one was more stringent, one was more uh, liberal, and they were having debates. And one of the greatest debates was what is the greatest commandment? And Jesus, they all agreed that it was the Shema, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And Jesus said, and they also believe love your neighbor as yourself, but once school kind of differed on how you did that, and some believe that all the temple laws and the Sabbath laws came before loving your neighbor. Jesus equaled them out. And then in this lesson, we learned that what does it mean to really love your neighbor? And Jesus brilliantly used Scripture to let them know how to do that and what that meant. And this lesson has quite a bit of Scripture in it, and so I'm going to kind of go rapidly, but also I'm going to make the screen so that you can see the Scriptures and you'll still hear my voice. But talking about the how to love your neighbor. In Leviticus, it says, "Thou shalt not avenge nor bear any grudge against the children of thy people, but thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. I am the Lord." Now, in English, "love thy neighbor as thyself." That's a great translation, but um, in Hebrew, it basically means uh, love your neighbor like your neighbor is like yourself. So, you are hard to love at times. Your neighbor is hard to love at times. You are easy to love at times. Your neighbor is easy to love at times. To look at them just like you would look at how you look at yourself. Many times we judge people by their actions. We judge ourselves by our motives. And so we need to look at people and realize that they are, just like us in a lot of ways. And then in Leviticus 19:16, it says, "Thou shalt not go up and down as a talebearer among thy people, neither shalt thou stand against the blood of thy neighbor. I am the Lord." What that means is basically that you should not take your neighbor's, uh, you should not endanger the life of your neighbor. That's what stand against the blood of thy neighbor means. Uh, so it was not only that, but then in Leviticus 19 and 16, and let's see, yeah, hold on just a second there. Thou shalt, I am the Lord, so don't take the blood of thy neighbor. Um, and then you will, if you do these things, Leviticus 18:5, it says, "You shall therefore keep my statutes and my judgments, which if a man do, he shall live in them. I am the Lord." Live in them means to not just live on, but experience life fully. So you'll have a full life if you do the things and love your neighbor and do what the Lord commands. Um, in this whole idea of love your neighbor, um, and to uh, who is like yourself, and to not endanger their life, but the uh, the Hebrew term there, it means to not just to not endanger their life, but to enhance their life, and that's part of loving your neighbor. And then Jesus, when they got after him in Matthew chapter 12, 1 through 8, it said, "At the time Jesus went on the Sabbath day through the corn, and his disciples were hungered, and they began to pluck up the ears of corn to eat. But when the Pharisees saw it, they said unto him, Behold, thy disciples do what is not lawful to do upon the Sabbath day." And that has everything to do with loving your neighbor and not endangering their life, and And so he says, but he said unto them, have you not read that what David did when he was a hungered and they were that they were with him, and how he entered into the house of God and did eat the showbread, which was not lawful for him to eat, neither for them that which were with him, but only for the priests? So they were hungry. The disciples were hungry, and that word, as an aside, it really, it's not just hungry; it's starving, and they really needed to eat. And then so Jesus connects their hunger with the hunger that David had and his men when they were starving, basically. And they asked the priest, "Do you have any bread?" And the priest said, "No." And this is in First Samuel. So the priest said, "No, we don't have any bread um, except the showbread." And they realized then that the uh, the law of not endangering your neighbor um, and to enhance their life was greater than the temple law. And then Jesus goes on to say, "Or have you not read in the law that on the Sabbath days the priests in the temple profane the Sabbath and are blameless? But I say unto you that in this place is one greater than the temple. But if you have known what his meaneth is, I will have mercy and not sacrifice, you would have not condemned the guiltless, for the Son of Man is Lord even on the Sabbath day." So here he's saying, so in David's case, honoring and loving your neighbor and not endangering their life and feeding them if they're hungry is greater than the temple law. And then he's saying, well, the priests work on the Sabbath and they're not guilty. They're allowed to work on the Sabbath because they have to do the sacrifice. So in that case, the temple law is greater than the Sabbath law. Well, if the Sabbath law is greater, is not as great as the temple law, and the law of honoring and loving your neighbor and not endangering your life is greater than the temple law, and the temple law is greater than the Sabbath law, then the law of honoring and loving your neighbor, not endangering their life, is greater than the Sabbath law. And that's the way Jesus showed them that we must love our neighbor first, and that is a way of loving God. Um, in the series that we've been doing, one of the statements that the teacher on the video made was, "I don't say to my wife, I love my wife, I love God more than my wife." He said, "I say loving my wife is an act of loving God because I'm loving my neighbor. I'm not endangering their life. I'm making their life better." So as we look at what loving our neighbor means, it means to not endanger their life. It means to make their life better. And then the next question, which we'll answer next time, is who is my neighbor? And Jesus answered that as well. So I pray that this has been a help to you, and it will help us as we go into this new year, 2026, to truly realize what it means to love thy neighbor. Jesus's whole idea was to love God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And part of doing that, part of loving God, was loving your neighbor as yourself. So until next time, love God, love each other.